On a world spinning its way to damnation amidst the fear and despair of a broken fan base, who's left to pick up the pieces afterwards? Handkerchief Dynasty. I am, as always, your secret professor, joined by friend of the show, Mr. Zach Laing of Oilers Nation and the Nation Network. Hello, Zach.
Hey, a friend. I'm honored. That's such a nice thing for you to say. And beautiful intro, by the way. Very eloquent.
Thank you. Thank you. I do what
Sums
I can.
Sums everything up very well too.
So here we are in front of microphones, tasked with discussing the Edmonton Oilers now, a couple of days after their exit. What are your thoughts in total on the series, and should people be freaking out? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much should people be freaking out?
I think if 10 is underworld panic, I think we're somewhere in the 4 to 5 range. I mean, there's reason to be concerned. There's legitimate reason to be upset with what transpired. In the same breath, not that it means a ton, but they had a pretty great regular season, and obviously, getting swept in the first round of the playoffs is never what any team ever wants. I think it's the weirdest sweep the NHL's ever seen. I don't think I've ever heard of a team outplaying and dominating the way the Oilers did for, basically everything but a period and a half, and still coming out without a single win. I mean, in my eyes, game one, the first 10 minutes of that game or the first period of that game was pretty poor from the Oilers. And then obviously the collapse in game 3 was devastating, to say the least, right? And I thought for the remainder of the series, the Oilers played really, really well and probably deserved to be having a much different fate than they had right now. So, Connor Hellebuck remembered that he's a Vezina caliber goaltender and one of the best in the NHL. And I think that was a big reason why, the Oilers are saying what the hell happened, and why weren't we able to even win a single game here?
Does a lot of it come down to Winnipeg's depth players outplaying our depth players? They had a lot of guys that people had question marks beside their name on their defensive core, and they all played admirably, Whereas we had Ethan Bear giving away like with the most egregious giveaway of all time, etc.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that the Oilers' lack of depth through their lineup is a major issue. Winnipeg is a pretty deep team up front, especially on the back end, not so much. I don't think the Jets are a very good defensive team at all, to be honest. They get bailed out a lot by, a world-class goaltender in Connor Hellebuck, who, in the regular season was pretty terrible against the Edmonton Oilers. And then again, like I said, remember that he's one of the best in the league for good reason. And he showed that out there in the 4 games. I mean, I don't know. It's I think you'd like to see obviously more depth scoring throughout your lineup. You'd like to see Connor and Leon break through. You'd like to see them get some damn calls, which is, a whole other topic of conversation. I think at the end of the day, coming back to what you asked me at first, I don't think the panic level should be too high because of the fact that I thought the Oilers played a really good series. I really think they did. So undeniably frustrating to sit here, though, and saying, what just happened when we watched the Oilers getting swept in 4 games against an inferior Jets team.
Does this series in particular, I'm not one for overreacting to a small sample size of games, but do you think this series crystallizes that we need, if we're going to have young defensemen in our defensive core, we need them in the 6-7 slot instead of in the top 4, at least until they've demonstrated an ability to, play well at that? Really, we've been chasing the ghost of Ethan Bear's rookie season for a while now. He's taken at least a step and a half back.
I don't know.
I don't want to throw him under the bus here, but
No, I
If
understand. I
we
mean, I think,
got another big defenseman who could eat a lot of minutes, we wouldn't have to be trying like an Ethan Bear with Darnell Nurse, etc.
yeah, but you got to remember that Ethan Bear and Darnell Nurse were one of the Oilers' best defensive pairings before Tyson Barrie came into here, right?
But
So
have
I
they
don't.
regained that form like this season much though, as a
Well,
pairing?
no, I think Ethan Bear definitely took a step back in his game this year. Compared to his rookie season, he definitely had a bit of a sophomore slump. Again, I still thought that he, as a whole, was a good defenseman for the Oilers this year. I really do. So I don't think that, obviously, there's some mistakes that were made by Bear, just like there were mistakes made by Connor McDavid and Leon
Sure.
Draisaitl
Yeah.
and everybody else. Like Josh Archibald taking, the worst penalty I've ever seen taken. Sorry, Josh, but that was a bad one. So I think it's hard to single out Ethan Bear as a guy that was bad in this series, because I didn't think that he was. I think as a whole, the Oilers' defense was good for the most part, right? Like they kept us in games. They forced 3 into overtime. Mike Smith probably wants to have a couple of those goals back too. I mean, the game winner in game 3, that was a tough one. A long shot from the outside that he saw, and then same thing with Kyle Connor last night. A long shot that he had an eye on. So, those are undeniably goals that he's probably wanting back as well. So, but Ethan Bear, he's a really good defenseman, and he's going to be a big part of this franchise for a very long time. So, I think for him, it was good. It was good that he got that chance to play on the top pairing. I think it was good that he's getting that experience of playing in different situations, playing when the game's on the line. What about Dave Tippett, really shortening the bench in overtime? I mean, was that exactly the right play either, especially when you're benching guys like Alex Chason, who got you the go-ahead goal in the second period, a guy that looked good stepping into the lineup? Or, what about Jujhar Khaira, who scored in game 3 as well? He scored the 4th goal on a beautiful tip in front. He was generating a lot of shot attempts all series long. So, I think there's an argument to be made that it's more than just on the players too, and that the coaches could have done some things differently as well.
So you take issue with like the deployment, especially in overtime?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's hard because I see it from both ends, right? I see that as a coach, you want your big guns to be going. You want your top 6 to be the guys that are out there for the most part. But I didn't really feel that any of the bottom 6 guys that sat necessarily had bad games either. So again, I understand, it's single overtime, double overtime, triple overtime. The most likely guys here that are going to score are your star players, right? But then you got the Peter Klima argument too, right? Stepping off the bench, and I can't remember which overtime period it was, to win the game for the Oilers. So, I personally would have liked to see, Tippett sticking with more of rolling through all the lines. But I also do totally understand why, Darnell Nurse played 62 minutes last night and that sort of a thing too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, riddle me this. Do you think we're too small as a team? Do you think we need more size through our lineup?
No, I don't. I mean, I think I understand that you have to have big teams. Like typically big teams win, but I think it's a tired trope, to be honest with you. I would much rather have a team of the most skilled players that you could find instead of a team of players who are, big because big.
Well, I mean,
Big
not because big. I mean, we have skill. Obviously, we want speed or size and skill. I mean, that's why Zach
yeah,
Cassian is around, for fuck's sakes. Like, we need someone
yeah,
who's like a Zach Cassian, but actually good.
yeah. I mean, I think there's 32 teams in the league that are looking for a Zach Cassian that's good. So undeniably, there's value in having that as a player. What is there out there in terms of finding somebody like that right now? I haven't had a chance to really sit and dig through the free agent lists or who could be ahead in the trade market this summer. So maybe come back. We could talk about that one in a future episode. But
Gonna be a
I think
crazy free agent year, I think. Like, who
it's going to
knows?
be, yeah, it's going to be a big one. I think the Oilers definitely would like to get some more size up in their top six. Cocoon was good. He was a good player. He wasn't great, but I think he's a guy who you can replace in the top six with somebody with some size. And I think going into next year, it's going to be really interesting to see the way the Oilers deploy McDavid and Draisaitl based off of who they're able to pull in from free agency in the trade market, because I could see with the emergence of Jesse Puljujarvi, I could easily see Puljujarvi and Nugent Hopkins becoming a 1-2 punch on the second line next year and moving forward. And then you can stack McDavid and Draisaitl all year and just let them, run show on the Pacific Division. But I mean, in the short term, yeah, I do think that the Oilers could definitely add some more size to throughout their lineup.
Who's on that second line with Nugent Puljujarvi? Just for the sake of argument, was it Ryan McLeod?
I mean, yeah, it could very well be Ryan McLeod. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be, ready to take on a full-time top six role in the NHL. I thought he looked damn fine doing it against Winnipeg. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a really smart player and somebody who could probably flourish in that sort of a position. Kyler Yamamoto, I think, could be a good fit there too. He's a smaller guy, but he plays a much bigger style of game, and I think he would be able to play off of a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi, especially in the offensive zone. I think they're both guys who love to bang bodies around, and they're really, really hard on the forecheck. And I think Nugent Hopkins is still a very, very good player, and somebody who could help pick up some of the defensive, picked up on some of the defensive end stuff too. And then you have a chance to go out there and find, a big guy or a skilled player who can play on the top line alongside McDavid and Draisaitl. And then you can kind of see what can go from there. Because I think Puljujarvi's showing that he can drive a line on his own. So
and McDavid's also showing that he doesn't seem to like playing with Puljujarvi. And I can't really blame him, because I don't know if it's actually the most amazing fit long term. Like, it was decent enough for this season for now, but I don't know if there's a long term. I don't know if there's any really real chemistry there. There's a little bit, because they both got skill, and anyone can put up some numbers playing with McDavid for sure. But in terms of like the puck distribution, like that's when you saw McDavid getting super frustrated. When he was right there trying to break out from when Puljujarvi had the puck along the boards, and he clearly just wanted it to pass it to him while he was in stride, and instead like Puljujarvi tried to like flip it like into the neutral zone.
I mean, I think in my eyes, Puljujarvi is the perfect player to play alongside McDavid. And I think that there's a really good fit there long term. I think, especially last night, it's a heat of the moment sort of situation. So, I think, for the first time ever, we saw Connor McDavid laying into somebody in the middle of a game for the first time ever. And it just so happened to be Puljujarvi. And those are lessons that Puljujarvi has to learn too. I mean, like, it's his fourth playoff game of his career. So he's still learning, and he's still a young player who's learning and developing overall. I thought they had chemistry all year. I thought they were very productive pairing, and I think Jesse Puljujarvi is a very, very good player. I think he's got the size and the reach. He's got the tenacity. I think that can play off of McDavid very well. I think it's just a pair that has to grow and learn a little bit over time. All throughout the year, we heard nothing but good things from McDavid, Draisaitl, Tippett when it came to Puljujarvi in his game. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it all depends on who you bring in this offseason. I think that's one of the biggest things that could potentially impact whether or not Puljujarvi plays alongside McDavid or not.
I mean, it really seems like a legit third line center to anchor a third line, because some commentators have said they don't know, we don't really have a third line, we have two fourth lines kind of. To be honest, I would not be averse to Kenny Holland like trading some younger roster players in a package deal for a veteran that could really move the needle. I think like, to be honest, like I like Yamamoto and I like Bear, but I kind of consider them both trade chips at this point. I don't think I'm not giving up on them. I think they're both going to have long NHL careers. But at a certain point, you can't have as many young players on the roster as we have. At a certain point, you need a little more age, a little more experience, a little more moxie. I mean, when people like James Neal and Mike Smith are coming in and they immediately become like huge leaders in the teams, that speaks to something, you know? And James Neal's probably not going to be
Yeah,
back next year, really. Mike
yeah, I
Smith
don't
probably will
disagree
be.
with you. I don't disagree with you there on that note. I mean, I wouldn't be. I mean, I don't think either Yamamoto or Bear really should be trade chips. I mean, I'd probably trade a guy like Caleb Jones 5 or 10 times over Ethan Bear,
Yeah,
solely
that's
because of how
probably a
much
good
more
point.
valuable. Probably just because of how much more valuable a right-handed shot defenseman is. But like, it's the age-old story. It's the Jeff Petrie thing. Like, that's the way that I look at it. Like,
Mm.
you know, so we're gonna just treat Ethan Bear like Jeff Petrie and trade him for Magic Beans. I mean, yeah, that's a really difficult situation to put the team in. You know, I
No, I
think
mean, these are all
they
trades where we're getting the best player back, though. You know, because
well,
oftentimes,
but
like when
you
you're trading a top young prospect, it's for a player that's more established. You know.
yeah, but that's easier said than done, right? I mean, take a look at the Philip Forsberg and Martin Erat trade that
Mm.
happened, you know, what, 8 years ago now, right?
Mhm.
That was the argument for that exact trade. You trade, you know, Philip Forsberg, who's this young, you know, might be a good player down the road, for Martin Erat, who's, you know, the gritty, wily veteran who, you know, could come in and put up some points, and it just completely backfired. You know, I would rather take a shot with Yamamoto and Bear than try and trade them away for other parts. I think there's other assets in the organization that you could trade before that, and I'm not even sure if, you know, the Oilers would come out on top. It's a very nice thing to think that the Oilers would always be coming out on top of a trade, but I think, you know, through what we've seen in the last number of years under Ken Holland and under previous regimes, the Oilers' success rate in the trade market historically hasn't been very, very good. So I would be a little hesitant to trade one of those guys. But that's just my perspective on it, I guess.
You're listening to Handkerchief Dynasty with Zach Laing. Please follow us on Twitter at HandkerchiefDY1 and on Patreon at patreon.com/Handkerchief Dynasty. I've decided our post game 3 episode is just going to remain in the Patreon vault because it was a very intimate, very vulnerable, very difficult episode. Okay, well, here's a question for you, because I think there's going to be some turnover. So I'm going to give you a name. You give me your hunch, your gut feeling, whether they're going to be playing for the Oilers regular season next year. Okay. Mikko Koskinen.
Okay. No.
Jujar Kara.
Yes.
Zach Kassian.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see him back. I don't think I could see him being traded at this point. No.
Okay. Ethan Bear, you're already a yes. We know. I'm sure
Yeah. Yeah.
Yamamoto, you're
He's back.
definitely a yes.
Yeah.
Nuge,
I'm a
you're
yes.
resigning for sure. Do you think
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
value has gone down a little bit due to his like really kind of like lackluster regular season by his own standards, and like he may have
Oh
that a
man,
nice goal in the
it's
playoffs, but he can't be going in with the head of steam in those negotiations, can he?
yeah, no, it's actually really going to be interesting. I mean, I think maybe it might help the fact that he's had a bit of a down year in a contract season. I mean, down year based off of like what he's been able to do in the last 2 or 3 seasons. But interestingly enough, his like points per game average is only like 0.06 below what it is for his entire career right now, for like this season. So, you know, all the while his underlying numbers are the best that he's posted of his entire NHL career. He controlled and drove play in terms of shot attempts and expected goal rates at a much higher percentage than he has in the past. So, you know, I know the Oilers aren't big at all on analytics, so that's not really going to help Nugent Hopkins's argument, I don't think. But you know what? It might mean that you can get him for 5.5, 6 million versus 6.5, 7 million that you may have otherwise needed to pay him. But I do think he's back. Yeah, I don't see him going anywhere.
Okay, Tyson Berry's agent calls you up tomorrow and says 5 times 5. Let's get it done right now, Kenny. What do you do?
Nah, I'm walking.
You're
Yeah, I'm
walking from
walking.
5 times 5.
Yeah, I'm walking by 5 times 5 for sure. That's the term. It's the term
Okay.
that scares me. For me, I don't even. I'm reluctant to even re-sign Barry on a 1-year contract even at the same rate that he did this year. And I know there's not a lot of people that are going to see it that way. But I think Tyson Barrie's defensive woes did not offset his offensive production in my eyes. And I think you have a guy in Evan Bouchard who can step up into the Oilers lineup as an everyday player next year and help to replace some of the offense that you lose from Tyson Barrie. I think that's kind of the best way to look at it. I would much rather take the money you'd be spending on Tyson Barrie and find yourself, a top 9 winger who can put up 30 points, 40 points for you next season. I think there's more value in that. When you look at the contract, not only in the short term, but the long term, as well as the development of Evan Bouchard, I think, you're at a net win if you're able to pull in a 30, 40 point winger with that money and have Bouchard slide up in the lineup.
And then Adam Larson, Kenny Holland's probably going to push hard to re-sign him. Does he take a discount on what he was making before, like 4.1-ish, or does he take in less, you think?
Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting one. He had a pretty incredible season. He was the second best defenseman in the NHL in terms of wins above replacement for defensemen. So that's really, really good. He had a definite resurgence in his game. He was finally healthy. The back injuries that he's fought through for the last number of years seem to have healed up pretty nicely for him. And he was great for the Oilers this year. I've not been a very big fan of his over the last number of years. Doesn't have to do with the trade or anything, but rather just his own game and what he's brought or what I felt he's lacked. But I do think he comes back. And the more I think about it, the more I'm okay with Larson coming back. The big scare for me there is the term more so than the dollars. I would be more comfortable, giving him like a 2-year contract worth like $4.5 or $5 million than giving him a 4 or 5-year contract worth, $4 million or $4.5 million. I think you try and go shorter and you pay a little bit more for him. He is 28 years old. We do see that defensemen can start to have a pretty significant drop off in their game around 30, 31 years old. And as somebody for Larson who suffered, back injuries throughout his career, that's a really hard injury to play through and to deal with. So, but I do think that Adam Larson's back.
So when you do your paper napkin calculation and you don't re-sign Barrie and you re-sign Nuge and Larson, where does that leave us roughly for cap space going into this offseason? Because I know without any free agent sign, it's around 25 million, right?
Yeah. So, conservatively, I've got, Nugent Hopkins around $6 million and Larson around $4 million in kind of my mind right now. So, you take 10 million off, that's about $14-15 million right there. And that's not even accounting for, potential James Neal trade or buyout, as well as a potential Mikko Koskinen trade or buyout. So,
which are both fairly probable at this point, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they're both fairly probable. The goaltending situation is going to be the most interesting thing, I think, about this team moving forward. You've got Ilya Konovalov coming over from Russia, who is assumingly coming over to play NHL minutes. I don't see him being a guy heading down to the AHL at all, if he does for not a very long time. Obviously, you got Mike Smith at 39, soon to be 40 years old. In the exit interviews today, he wasn't ready to comment on his career, his future, if it's with the Oilers, if he's going to retire or anything like that. He was very coy about it all. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, because I don't think you can bring back Mikko Koskinen and say that that's a good move. But I would understand if they did, because I think for good stretches, Koskinen was a good goalie for the Oilers this year. Basically between, Mike Smith returning and him kind of blowing up in the last 3 or 4 games he played this year, it was like a 920, 930 even strength save percentage goalie. That's really good. So he was good for the Oilers when they needed him to be, but I think you need somebody in net who is going to be more reliable and more consistent than
give the team more mojo. Like we would shrink because we just did not trust him, when you let in the first goal so many times. So I assume also I mean, we may have on the last episode talked about there being changes in the coaching staff. Like you're not looking to make a change in the coaching area, right?
No, I mean you might see maybe like an assistant change or something like that. Um, my at minimum, um, Tippett's got a year left on his contract. So he signed a 3-year deal when the Oilers brought him in. So obviously he's going to be entering the final year of his contract. He said he's already talked to Dave Tippett, or sorry, he's already talked to Ken Holland, and there's no interest in doing any real talks about extension at this point. So it seems like Tippett's going to head into the season as without an extension, and we're going to see what happens. Next year I think will be the real tell. I think Tippett is good enough of a coach to get the Oilers over that hump, but it's going to be interesting to see if Ken Holland can do what he needs to do to help give Dave Tippett more and better weapons throughout his lineup.
And do you think Ken Holland, given his history, I think he's not a bad GM in that I don't think he makes horrible signings, but every GM can miss. Just look at the Kyle Turris signing. We could easily sign a free agent for $4 million. That's like a total airball, which is what worries me. Like, are you worried about that at all? I mean, you got to be.
Oh,
right?
Definitely. I mean, he doesn't have the greatest track record in free agency. He's signed some pretty egregious contracts in Detroit that handicapped the team for a number of years. So, knowing that Ken Holland's going into this offseason with, $24 million in cap space, as exciting as it is, it's also fairly nerve-wracking as somebody who covers and follows the team and wants to see the Oilers be a successful organization. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. I mean, I think there's some organizational changes that I could see the Oilers needing to make. I think they need to bring in a strong analytics department and use that in their analysis a lot more than they do currently, because you look at any of the top teams in the NHL and the teams that are going on, Vegas, Toronto, Colorado, just to name a few, have very deep and very strong analytics departments. And that is a big reason why they are so good. And, Ken Holland, I don't think is that type of a general manager at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like the Turris signing was obviously a really bad signing. And, I think if anybody looked at the anybody who did look at the underlying numbers of Kyle Turris saw that, he wasn't likely to rebound. And I had faith in him. I thought, a change of scenery would be a good thing for him and exactly what he needed to kind of revive his career. But he showed that that's not quite the case right now for him. So, yeah, I think you want to have as much confidence as you can in the organization. But, given the track record of not only Holland, but the Oilers in general, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months here.
Once some time has gone by and you've had time to look at that free agent crop, would you come back on and tell us about your findings?
Very happily. Yep.
Awesome.
I would very happily.
So can you just, on a spiritual level, maybe just speak to Oil Country as a hockey expert and see if there's any words of encouragement you can give them to help mollify the bitterness of this crushing defeat via sweep by the Winnipeg Jets?
Trust the process. That's the best thing that I can say. Trust the process. It's disappointing to see this happen. But you look at Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic wrote an incredible article this morning. I know there's a number of people who don't have subscriptions to it, but he talked to Ray Shero and kind of talked to him about what it was like, having Sidney Crosby come into the NHL. When Crosby came into the NHL, Pittsburgh was already a pretty good team. They had a lot of pieces in place, and it didn't take them very long to build that up, even more so around Crosby. But there's other players like Steven Stamkos, like Alexander Ovechkin, Joe Sakic, Nathan McKinnon now, who took, years to even get in the playoffs. Like Joe Sakic missed the playoffs in 5 of his first 6 years in the NHL. Connor McDavid through his first 5 years has already had, 3 years in the playoffs. And those guys have all gone on to win Stanley Cups, like a Sakic and Ovechkin and now Stamkos. So, these are the bumps and bruises that, a young team still learning has to go through over time. It's painful lessons to learn. It's painful to watch and see, the team, fall apart and lose the way that they did here. But at the end of the day, I think this is a team that's built for success in the future. So long as you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl leading the way, I mean, anything can happen. And especially this next year, the Oilers are going to be sitting in a really nice spot in a really weak Pacific Division. It's basically going to be like Vegas, the Oilers, 5 teams who missed the playoffs, and the Seattle Kraken. So, it's really going to be interesting to see, what the Oilers are able to put together and how they're able to respond going into next season, because they have an opportunity to to get a good spot going into the playoffs next year. Vegas is going to be some tough competition in the Pacific, but it's also going to be good for the Oilers because they're going to get to, on a regular basis, play against one of the best teams in the entire league. That makes teams better. So I know, I can't wait for next season to start already. So I'm anxious to see what can happen.
Fantastic. Yeah, always nice to have a bit of a hopeful note. We encourage all of our listeners to dive headfirst into your summer projects, lose your mind in the work. What are your projects coming up, Zach? You got any summer projects? Obviously, you got a lot of playoffs to cover coming up here.
Yeah, so close out some of the playoff stuff. I know I'll be doing some Leafs and some Jets work here, I think. Beyond that, we're going to be going into the season in review pieces for me with the Oilers. So that's going to be something I'll be diving into here probably by the end of this week. I'll probably start firing those out on a pretty regular basis. So, take a look at the offense and the defense, the special teams and the goaltending, do an article on each of those, do player by player breakdowns and that sort of a thing. And then I know we'll have our content coming soon, previewing the off season, looking at trade targets, looking at free agents and also the draft, because the Oilers held on to their first round draft pick. So, they'll be picking around the 20th overall spot, somewhere in that vicinity this year. So it'll be interesting to see who they take there, or if they trade the pick for that, which I don't think is a terrible idea whatsoever. So yeah, it's off season mode is as fun for me as in season mode is. So I can't wait to dive into everything.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to read that. That'll be really fun. Well, Zach, as always, thank you for your time and all your hard work. Much appreciated. To the listeners, thank you for listening. Just hold on a little bit longer and we'll start this long march through the summer together, okay?